Welcome to Stormin.net, a new way of watching TV online. We've been having some incredible interviews. Hope that you've been enjoying them. I'm honored to be interviewing Mr. Leroy Tice, who I consider a good friend, an incredible attorney, and just an incredible person who's doing some incredible stuff in this region because this is nationally. So I just want to put it like that. How you doing, Leroy?
Doing well, brother. How are you?
Hey, Leroy. First of all, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Oh boy, Delaware kid. Grew up in Milford, Milford High School. Went to Delaware State. Got my undergraduate degree there. Like yourself, a Hornet. Proud Hornet on Delaware State's board at the present time. Went to Seton Hall Law School after Delaware State, and came back to Delaware to practice law.
Let me ask you, you know, it's funny, I mean, like, you have a varied background, right? And especially, like, in this state, right? And because you're a guy who understands the community, how do you balance it? I'm just talking about as an attorney, right? How do you balance that? You know, like, when folks want you to do stuff that you know you can't, but you want to. You understand what I'm saying?
Right. It's a simple concept for... I think, or at least it should be for all professionals, all people in general, and certainly black professionals. If you have an opportunity to do well, you want to do good at the same time. That means that you're going to give back when you can, where you can, how you can. But there is kind of gravitational pulls on us, and I know you or us to do a lot, because, you know, we fully believe in, you know, we've been given a lot, so a lot is required of us. But to answer your question, I think you still have to be mindful of your time, because as a professional, you still have to dedicate to your craft the time and energy and effort to every single matter, as an attorney as I am. But that said, I have found education as a passion of mine, particularly education of the underserved communities. So I've been dedicating a lot of time to, like I said, the board at Delaware State, Eastside Charters Board, board at Innovative Schools, as well as the Hope Commission. But I think what I do is I tell folks what I can commit and how I can contribute. And if that's acceptable to them, then I will go for it.
You spoke of your craft. What made you want to be a lawyer?
Well, I worked in banking for a number of years. I won't mention the names of the banks, but great experience. I did well. But, you know, you find yourself waiting in line for any and every, even small promotion. So, you know, my thought was, just as I see things evolve around me, and certainly in my community, you know, the law is an integral part of everything that we do on a daily basis. Whether it's protection of our rights, whether it's getting access to certain, let's say, public resources. You know, I saw that as an opportunity. And one thing that I also, one thing that became my emphasis as I thought about embarking on a law career was that the law benefits some and burdens others. So I wanted to help. Again, going back to the concept of doing well and doing good at the same time. I saw no better vehicle than the law to do that. Because what I do really is a public service on a daily basis. And I'm sure you're going to this question, but I'll go ahead down that road. You know, personal injury, which are motor vehicle accidents, slip and falls, product liability, that could be, you know, relatively simple injuries to very complicated to death is what we do. Workers' compensation is what we do, meaning folks that are injured as a result of an industrial accident, anything at work. Anytime you're injured at work, that is under the auspices and governed by Delaware laws that relate to workers' compensation. It's one title in Delaware law, and all of your rights are covered in this one statute. And obviously there'll be other statutes that may intertwine, but
actually, I was going to go another direction, but I'm glad you brought that up, right? And because I know you as a friend, and I know how compassionate you are, and you don't have to be specific about any specific case or anything, but because some of the people that you do deal with, is there anything that you went home and said, wow? I mean, you know what I mean? Like sometimes, like I'm just interviewing a guy, and I was telling him, like, I remember a case that I had as a social worker. And I went home that night and I had to speak to my mother because it was just like, it wowed me. It was like, it hurt me. Had you ever had that kind of experience?
yeah, absolutely. And again, so the practice areas: personal injury, workers' comp, some criminal cases I will take up, and also some employment cases I will take up. And not necessarily one case, because we take on a lot of them.
Right.
But there are several occasions where I go home at night and I say, we did the right thing by someone. There was a wrong that was committed, and we got that person a remedy. So there was a right, and then there was a wrong, and then we were able to help make it right. I have one particular employment case where a gentleman of Indian national origin came in my office, and immediately I felt like he had been wronged. Now I have to set out to prove it. And that's one particular case, and we did after some wrangling, some legal wrangling, resolve that case. But you know it in your gut,
right,
when someone has been wronged. Sometimes it can be quite obvious, a physical injury, brutality in any sense, whether it's accidental or intentional. And you just set out to make it right. We get, I'll tell you, the best reward I get beyond the financial reward is when I get thank you cards from my clients who, just take the time to sit down and send me a note because I've represented them in an accident and got them a recovery that of course they were entitled to, or an employment case where we've gotten them a recovery that encompasses their lost wages and future prospective lost wages. Without our intervention, that would not have happened.
I've had about 4 or 5 black men sit in your seat interviewing them who've come through the criminal justice system, and a lot of them have felt wronged by it, and a lot of them also felt like, I did a crime, I did a time. Does it pain you to see so many folks who look like us because you're in the court system? You know what I mean?
I do. And I think society wants to go in a place of color blindness. When you read some of the opinions of, and I'm going to answer your question. I just want to put it kind of in context for myself. Okay. When you read some of the opinions of Clarence Thomas, for example, U.S. Supreme Court, where he speaks in terms of color blindness or color blindedness. I think that's still an ambition, meaning we're not there. And you're talking about it in the context of the criminal justice system. If you look at the data shows that more of young men in particular of color are prosecuted. They're arrested and prosecuted. What that tells you is at every phase we have more contacts with the system. Because first and foremost, there's a public safety and law enforcement system, if you'll call it that. The agencies that are involved there, they police our areas. They police the underserved areas. I think that's politically avant-garde. That's the thing to do. Young African American males have been portrayed in every possible medium in a way that we have been villainized, and so that leads to over-policing. Then from there, you get to the prosecutor's office. In our state, it's the wonderful Attorney General. And they start making decisions about who gets charged. From there, it enters into the judicial system. It gets to the judges. They make decisions. And then from there, it goes to the corrections system, where a lot of us end up, or probation and parole, which is under correction. So when you walk into a courtroom, you see a lot of us. But I'll tell you what really pained me one day, and I don't do much in the way of family law, so I rarely get to family court, but there are certain days where they have calendars for the judges where there have been violations, I think, of the School Crime Reporting Act. So younger kids who have, gotten into a scrape in school actually make their way to family court. And we're talking about children who come up to your waist. And when I saw that, that was surreal for me. It's one thing to see adult brothers and sisters coming through the Court of Common Pleas in Delaware, which is the lower level court, or coming through the Superior Court, which is the higher level court. Court of Common Pleas, Misdemeanor Court, Superior Court, Felony Court. It's one thing to see African American males being, kind of carted through there in large numbers, but it was another thing to see children coming through family court at such a young age, then conditioning them in a way that it's not a stretch to go up to the 4th or 5th floor. So that had a real effect on me. And since then, I'd like everybody to know, I mean, Delaware has, the General Assembly has softened the school crime reporting.
House Bill 85, I think it was.
I believe so, and so they've softened it a bit. So schools have discretion, school officials have discretion.
Has there been a lawyer or several lawyers who you looked up to or have had influence on the way you try to practice?
Yeah, in Delaware, we have a very proud tradition, and this is transcending race. The Delaware bar, in my estimation, and I think you can ask many Delaware lawyers, they will tell you. I mean, we feel like this is I hate to use the word superior, but it is a proud tradition that we have here of good lawyering, if not good lawyering, great lawyering, and again, transcending race. And your question is my particular mentors. I'd like to say all the time, there are great lawyers in Delaware. There are a lot of them. Obviously, I have to distinguish myself. And I certainly do that on a daily basis, I think, by just being accessible to my clients and the level of information my clients get. That distinguishes, as I say, my coffee bean from their coffee bean. And one of my mentors, a man named Perry Goldlust, taught me to practice law from that perspective. The treatment of the client service perspective. That's Perry Goldlust again, a wonderful Delaware lawyer. Gary Aber, another wonderful Delaware lawyer that practices in employment law. Will Redfern, and these are all Caucasians I'm talking about, who have been integral in shaping my career and really knowing that the details are in the details. But if there's one individual, that would be Charles H. Tolliver IV, who just left the Superior Court bench, who at this point is like a father to me in the legal world, who taught me early on that if you're going to eat today, you're going to work today, because you have to be the very best you can be every single day.
I find this conversation fascinating, because, and I want to have you on to give some more legal opinions, but I do want to ask you one more question before I let you go. Because you brought it up about Clarence Thomas, and I look at Lewis Redden. If you look at both of their works, and I'm sure you have, what's different from those guys, if any, or what's similar, or am I reading something different into it? Because a lot of times we in the public are because especially in class, if we don't agree with them in Uncle Times, if we agree with them, they are our brother.
You know what I would say to your audience is, you know, it's like the preacher on Sunday tells everybody in the pulpit, read it for yourself, right? You know, you can look at Brown v. Board and look at Louis Redding's work and what he did in concert with former Justice Marshall in that case. You know, litigated that to success. So he was fighting for the vindication of African American children's rights. And again, did that with success. Beyond that, you know, folks can talk to their grandfathers and grandmothers about his presence in this community. So my suggestion as it relates to both of those men is to, you know, you get information about people on your own. And the reason I say that as I transition into talking about Clarence Thomas is a lot of formulated opinions about Clarence Thomas, almost all of which point to or arrive at, you know, portraying him as someone that's an enemy of our race, and Uncle Tom, who I think is generally seen as an enemy of the race. But the reason I encourage folks to read for themselves is because if you read his opinions, there's a depth to the man there that you may not get by listening to a soundbite in the New York Times or you know, listening to this or that morning show, reflecting on him. Read the man's opinions, and I think what he would say would be, and what I've read in his opinions, particularly on affirmative action, is that you know, we do have a proud tradition of being able-bodied professionals who were self-determined at one point in our history. And his view of affirmative action is we veered away from self-determination and ended up in a place where we're looking for others to help us determine our fate. I think if you boiled it down, he would tell you that you know, segregation was not necessarily a bad thing. And now you hear a lot of folks talking about, you know, particularly those that are concerned about educating the youth today, post the, you know, where there is no Wilmington school district and things like that. Boy, folks are now, when they analyze where we are academically, dropout rates, suspension rates, all that good stuff, they say, boy, segregation wasn't necessarily so bad. So, again, going back to your point, you may find out that a Redding and a Clarence Thomas have some commonalities. Again, though Clarence Thomas is painted one way, and his decisions generally come out anti-affirmative action and such, but understand his reasoning. I wouldn't agree with him, obviously, but we can agree to disagree. And I can agree that he took an academic approach to it.
That's good, man.
And stuck to his principles. But at the end of the day, I think they're two wonderful, wonderful African-American attorneys. And if we're ever going to change the perceptions of us, the negative perceptions of us, it's one demonstration of excellence at a time.
Thank you, Leroy.
Thank you, sir.
In our city, the graduation rate's about 50%. 50%, that means half of the kids aren't graduating.
And that depends on what neighborhood you're in.
Yeah, some of them 75%. There was a story about Southbridge, you know, they were celebrating 1 or 2 kids that had graduated in the last...
A celebration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That should be the minimum expectation for every kid.